Anne and Kate, such a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
So, Anne, you are an art advisor. Kate, you are a collector, and you're both based in New York City.
We met 5 years ago at, I think it was a rooftop party for
We,
VC.
yeah. Very, very out of the blue because I don't typically go to those. I
Great
work in
call.
tech and I think I try to not do too many tech things outside of work. But Anne is correct. We met at a rooftop party. We were kind of all squished in this rooftop, lots of people coming and going. And I like suddenly turned around and everyone was introducing themselves and there was Anne. We all introduce ourselves with like, your name and what do you do, which is a question I hate. And then Anne was like, I'm an art dealer. And I was like, I've never met an art dealer ever in my life. What is that? And then we started talking. And I think after that, she started telling me about the gallery walks or art salons that she would host. And so that was really our first like hangout and our first times getting to know each other.
So, I guess you became friends after that and then started working together and developed this sort of art advisor, collector, more professional relationship over time.
Kate was showing up to, like she said, the gallery walks I was hosting and the salons. And she just has such a curious mind and she didn't know much about the art world at the beginning. And so now I'm working with her as her advisor, just guiding her through how the market works and the ecosystem and different aspects of building a collection.
It was really fun because I think in the beginning, it was mainly about understanding the new emerging artists and getting to know these also emerging galleries, which was really cool for me to see. I don't think I had an intention at the beginning to really buy art. I just was like really trying to understand. And then during the process, Anne kind of explained what an art advisor relationship typically looks like if and when I decide to go in that direction. And during one of the salons, I kind of like made the initial leap to buy something. And I think that had kicked off the collecting journey. And then we've been working together ever since.
At what point did you think, okay, I'm going to take this a little bit more seriously and become a collector? I mean, I don't know if you ever thought about it that way, but I'm sure there was a point where you thought, okay, I
Yeah.
really love this.
I think when that first bank transfer leaves your account, you're like, all right, it's on. We're doing this now. Um, Actually, no, I would probably say it was the second ACH transfer that leaves your account. That's when you're like, oh, I'm not just purchasing something for a living room wall anymore. I'm
Mhm.
purchasing something because I connected with something that I saw, or I connected with the artist whose practice was really unique and told a cool story. I think at the beginning when I saw the first piece I bought, I was like, oh, that would look great on this wall, which was empty. And I really needed something to fill it. So it kind of just felt like more of a convenient decoration. And I was just coming out of a long relationship and I finally had my own space. So it kind of just felt like that and very isolated. And then when the second piece was purchased, then I was like, "Oh, okay. This is not really me decorating my space anymore. It's me really connecting with stories."
Okay. At that first piece, how did you find it? What was it?
And I think you have to tell this
Yeah.
story because you hosted the
So
salon.
it must have been like the third or fourth art salon. And the format of a salon is I invite two or three gallerists to present artists from their program to a new audience. And I tell the gallerists, sometimes we don't even know who's coming to these salons. It's an ticketed event. And at this particular salon, I think there were like 70, 80 people. And the gallerists had brought physical pieces with them to the loft where we were hosting it. And one of the gallerists had placed on the table. We don't install, it's just like kind of very casually placed on the table or leaning on blocks. And there was a Neil Vanderberg work that one of the gallerists was presenting. And I think it clicked. And she had that moment where, oh, that I don't want anyone else living with this. Like I need to have this. But leading up to that moment, it's important to know that Kate had been educating herself and she had come to previous salons and previous gallery walks. And so she was familiar with the process and how it worked. There was still a big learning curve ahead of that after that, but up until that moment of purchase, I think it's really important to know that there was a lot of education and thinking that went into it beforehand.
Did you feel like you had a sense of what you were attracted to at that point of your developing taste or your burgeoning taste?
I think at that time, I had a very specific eye for things, and Anne can probably attest that that taste has just changed and evolved over time. And I don't think it's very linear either. There are things I'll just kind of go back to, things I'll reference again, but I think the way I look at artwork now is so different from the way I looked at it when I first joined Anne's salons. When I first saw the Neil Vandenberg piece, it was very, I think for me, visually easy because I was like, oh, this is like, it was a portrait almost of a figure with a hand over them, and then the eye is going through the hand, and the colors were like beautifully done. And it was just anyone who walks in our home kind of gets arrested by the piece. Also because it, greets you the first second you set foot in the house. So they have no choice but to look at it. But it was just visually very beautiful for me. So I think that was, I just was gravitating towards, what the actual composition looked like. And then I think over time, as we've gone to more gallery walks or gone through more salons, or Anne would show me more previews and actually share the artist's bio or like the statement for their collection, then I start asking more questions about like the process, or when artists typically use material like this, how do they use it? And what makes this so unique, or what makes this so challenging or complicated? How does that tie into the story that they're trying to tell? I think there are way more questions now than before. So I think that probably shapes how you're perceiving the art too.
What made you feel comfortable working with Anne specifically?
It would be twofold. I think the first is it's like meeting any friend. Sometimes when you click with somebody, you don't always quite know why. It's just such an easy conversation. And then you kind of dig below the layers a little bit more, and your values are probably the same. Your sense of humor is the same. So it made me feel very at ease to just work with someone like Anne, who didn't make learning about art so intimidating. And I think when I ask questions about things that I feel are probably very obvious to people who've worked in art for a long time, I was more approached with, oh, here's like a way you can think about it. Here's how I would define it. Here's something else that you can think about. So it made learning very fun and very easy. And then I think the second piece that I would talk about is her practice is like kind of runs a gamut between people who are just coming up, very emerging, to, you know, artists who've been around for a long time. So I think her ability to kind of bring both of those sides and then see how each of her clients kind of fit on that spectrum and what they're looking for is really, really cool. But I think paying attention to, I really like emerging artists. I really like artists that do something kind of unique or speak to my cultural background or something like that. And I think she pays attention to that really well.
Very
Wow,
cool.
thank you. Can I get that on my website?
So, Anne, let's talk about how you got into this world, because you were also working on the corporate side before, then you moved into gallery work.
Mhm.
So why did you make that transition? And what did working on that gallery side teach you that you realized you actually wanted to bring to more people through your own practice?
Yeah, so I started as an assistant at David Zwirner for 3 years, working under Christine Bell, and I learned so much about that that side of the business. And I think that's a really important lens to learn from when you switch over to being an art advisor, because now you can speak to both sides. You can speak to the collectors and you understand where the gallerists are coming from. And so after Zwirner, I joined the sales team at Fergus McCaffrey. And that's when I started running the international fair circuit and understanding what it was like to work on one side of the booth. And now as an art advisor, I'm on the other side guiding clients through. So it was really important to my career path. And then being on the other side and now being an advisor, I feel like I can help many more clients and build more collections where I'm not so limited to a gallery program and a gallery roster. Now I can really speak more to the specific collection of the collector and what they're looking for, and source from different galleries and auction houses and studios. And I find that very fulfilling.
And what made you want to pursue that in the first place?
Well, I was working in mostly secondary markets and at the galleries, and I was hosting women's salons or young collectors nights, and kind of looking around and just being aware that people were my age, or in their 30s or early 40s, like they were not resonating with these artists. They couldn't really find a connection. I mean, they weren't living artists. And so I just kind of took a cue from that, and I was like, well, let's find some artists you do resonate with.
Because you kind of want to go back to what you were talking about, the story you were sharing earlier about the salon.
Mhm.
It's an interesting format, right? Because it sounds like it's quite a large group of people. I thought it was more intimate, but 70, 80 people is a lot. However, it does sound it's relatively informal and casual. And
Mhm.
so I was wondering, what is it that you were hoping to happen there, or what is happening there that you don't think could happen, in a gallery setting or even at a fair?
The salons are not always 80 people. That was that one specific one that Kate
Okay.
came to. But typically the salons are intimate. They're 15 to 20 people, maybe 30. And I started them because it was late 2020, early 2021 when the fairs really weren't back. And so my friends at the galleries were kind of just, how do we meet new people? And so I thought, well, let's just create the opportunity for you to meet new clients. And the idea for the salon was to kind of connect the two worlds, the art world and the galleries, and then also bring in this new audience that is curious and really wanted to learn. And so we do keep the formats very casual. Like, I want people to know that there's no dumb questions. Like, this is exactly the space where you can ask those questions that, like, we've had questions over the years, do I need a ticket to go into a gallery? Where on the gallery side, obviously, we know you don't need to buy a ticket to go to the gallery, but I wanted to create a space where it was okay to ask that, and for us to say, like, no, you don't need to. Please come in. Please ask for us, and make it really friendly and welcoming. Because until you have that, like, welcoming environment, you're not going to see an increase in foot traffic and people who might be intimidated to walk in or don't know the right questions to ask. And so the salon is really to educate and empower people with that rhetoric, and to say, hey, here's how you can ask how much something is. Here are the important questions to ask about an artist's practice to build that smart collection.
It's more the environment and the casual and formal aspect of it, like that sort of removes a little bit this invisible barrier that you can sometimes feel when you walk into a gallery.
I really force people to talk to each other, because I think our world is she's laughing because halfway through a salon, I'll make everyone stand up and switch tables, because I really want, impactful dialogues and conversations to happen. I don't, we can talk about the weather all we want, but if you're sitting across the table from a gallerist, you're really learning more about why they started the gallery, why they invested in these artists, why they go to specific art fairs. And then in turn, they also learn about the client and what they're interested in, what they're looking for. And so to create a space for those significant dialogues to happen was really important to me.
I think one of the first salons I attended, I had brought 2 of my girlfriends,
Yeah.
I was like, I advertised it as, "We're gonna have a sit-down dinner, there's a presentation, we just, like, learn stuff." The minute we get in, we get checked in, and Anne's like, "Okay, you're at that table, you're at that table, you're at this table," and I was like, "Oh my god." So, it was already kind of a for not I know it's a forced thing, but I think to have it be designed so that you don't walk in and leave with the same people, that's so important.
And then you can go out with your girlfriends you brought and then talk about the things you learned at the salon. But at the salon, it's a chance to meet different people and different gallerists and develop new relationships.
And is there any sales that come out of this? I mean, Kate, obviously your story, but in general, do you feel like this is also has a commercial impact for the galleries that participate?
Definitely. And I've heard from the gallerists, and they have seen salon guests at fairs or walk-ins or at another salon or at the galleries, and it's just a really nice launching pad for those relationships.
A collector can build those relationships with the galleries later on, like, not just like a, "Hi, met you at the salon," and then that's it. Like, some of those have persisted. I think for me, it was like this Scott at Shrine,
Mhm.
Silka, obviously Silka Lindner. So I think just meeting them through that environment kind of eroded that initial barrier of, "Oh my god, I'm so intimidated. I don't know what questions to ask."
I know what you mean. And it's a is it a mix of different types of galleries, or they focus more on emerging artists or mid-career?
It's mostly emerging to mid-career,
Mhm.
especially because I'm prompting the gallerist beforehand. I'm like, "Look, the guests will generally be new collectors or just starting their collecting journey." So I ask them to just be aware of like the type of presentations and the artists you're bringing. So the price points tend to be at the more entry accessible point. We've had very established galleries present from Gladstone, Karma, Bortolami, but they're bringing artists from their roster that would speak more to this specific. It's sort of like when you're planning an art fair booth. It's like, okay, you're thinking about the environment and the attendees at the fair, so you want to present on your booth the works that will resonate, the artists that will resonate with that audience, and it's the same setup at the salon as well.
And Kate, you said you work in tech. Would you ever consider collecting full time?
Every waking moment of my life, I consider collecting full time. The issue is where the collecting funds will come from. That's really it. If I could wake up and be like, how do I start my day? I'll have a coffee. I'll look through the 17 previews that Anne has sent me. Unfortunately, I'm not like a trust fund heiress or anything, so I do have to work for everything in my collection. It's so sad.
I think that's the reality for a lot of people. So thank you for being open
It's
about
it's
that. Is it do you have a budget then? You set yourself a budget, or how do you think about building your collection? Very practically.
think my partner would want me to set a budget. He has intimated those constraints before. I don't think I have a formal budget. I think me and Anne, throughout our time working with each other, we've set like kind of a price point that we tend to share artworks within, but every now and then something will escape that by a lot. And I think if we both feel really strongly that it's like a good part of the collection, that it really spoke to me in a specific way, that it's really, really unique, or maybe it's part of an artist's like pivotal point in their career. It's probably important to invest and go outside of the normal range that we are typically comfortable in. That's happened like once or twice.
I also like to approach like also a holistic view like of the year. And so I'll say, I know we're very excited in January about these 10 artists, but we also have, all the May fairs to think about, or like the September shows that will open. So just kind of keeping a reminder of, well, we have these upcoming opportunities for discovery.
Exactly. I think that has happened at a couple of fairs where Anne will advise that let's set aside a specific pool for a discovery budget where you're at a fair, you probably have to act really quickly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's more learning, like who are the artists that the galleries are bringing up? Are there new artists that we should pay attention to and track over time? That has been so fun to do. And that's what contributes to like the following year. We're like, hey, remember when we saw this artist at this fair? Now they're at the Venice Biennale, like designing the whole pavilion. So that's been like a really cool journey. But I think also every now and then Anne will bring up something that maybe I'd forgotten about. It was something that we had talked about maybe once or twice. We didn't see any physical works for a while, and then suddenly they're having a new show. And suddenly it's like, okay, whatever plan we had for such and such fair, let's maybe hold until we see these things in person, because that could maybe change the trajectory of what we choose to collect throughout the year.
That's
That's a
interesting.
really nice way of saying that I tell you no. And I'm like, "No, you're not."
Yes.
I think a lot of advising is like, "Oh, I'm going to know your interest. We will learn about this artist, and you are not buying them right now." So
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly.
that.
No, there's been a few no's.
I was
Yeah.
wondering about that. Does it if Anne wasn't there, would you have made a lot of different decisions? Were there a piece that you wouldn't have bought and others that you would have bought that she clearly would have said no to?
This
Really on the
literally happened
spot?
in December. This literally happened in December. Anne was not around. No one was there to temper my my spending. I'd walked Art Basel Miami with her, I think maybe once or
Mhm.
maybe twice
I
during
think we
the
did it
week.
twice, yeah.
Yeah, twice during the
In
week.
Miami.
The
Yeah.
one time she was not there, I think I just impulsively purchased something. But I mean, I love it. I love it so much. But I was there with another friend who was like, "Wow, what a good deal. I would buy all 4." And I was like, "Okay, let's chill out." It was like
That's
4
cool.
cyanotypes, but she was like, "Oh, but like this is great as a collection. You should totally just buy all 4 and put it on your wall." And I was like, "You're the wrong person to be with me right now."
And Anne, what did you say when you came back?
Well, so I was like, "Congratulations. I'm so happy that you're happy because you just want a happy collector." But I just immediately went into work mode. I'm like, "Okay, let's look at the artist. Can I see other examples? Why did you pick this one? What's going on upcoming shows?" Like, I just went into, like, full research mode. So, the collect like, Kate's a great example of a collector that balances out the, like, reminder, like, she's so passionate that she bought this without me, and it was just that's part of the process, and I encourage it because it is a very passionate thing.
Yeah, I was like, "Well, we'll take it." And then later on, like an hour later, I was like, "Oh, I should put you in touch with my advisor." And I just like put them in an email and I was like, "Hi, please meet each other. Thank you so much."
And they're like, "What do you mean? You have an advisor?"
Yeah, where was she? Why did she unleash you? Where was the supervision?
I wanted to go back to what we talked about earlier, and I read in one of your newsletters on your Substack that you feel like there is a lot of platforms out there for contemporary art discovery, but not really spaces for discernment. And you even have a term for it. You call it a middle structure. And I'd love for you to expand on that a little bit more. What you mean by that, and what do you think? If you can explain exactly what you think is missing?
Yeah, I think that what's missing is, I guess, not to be reductive, but transparency. And I think when you have all these platforms and, it's very democratized and anyone can access it. And so your feeds are just compacted with so much information and content. And it is challenging to weed through it and to know and find validation like, oh, this is the right person to listen to, or this person I trust. And to build that trust, I think you need that transparency. There are lots of advisors, there are lots of people making top 10 lists, but here's why I'm doing it. And I just want to say out loud what I'm thinking and why I came to the conclusions I did and why I made my selections and why I curated specific pieces either to place in a people's exhibition or to place in my newsletter. Then it goes back to the viewer or the reader or the subscriber, and now it's on them to decide. Like, oh, I've heard what Anne says. Now I'm critically thinking about, does that resonate with me? Do I agree? Do I not agree? It's totally fine if you don't agree. I would actually like you to continue your curiosity and find someone that you do want to listen to and buy from and support artists that they're supporting as well. So Substack, Instagram, they've been really great spaces for discovery and to start those dialogues with collectors and clients who want to be patrons of the arts.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's so much. There's so much, like so many topics, so many artists to
Yeah.
follow. I'm complete analysis paralysis, if I'm honest. I started this project that I was hoping would help me make decisions, and now I just learn more and more and more, and it's worse, you know? It's
Yeah.
still I know more clearly what I like and what I don't like, but, I still find it really hard to, push the buy button. So, it's,
The more
yeah.
you know, the more you realize you don't know, and it's just this ever expanding landscape of deciding and curating it down for your own personal tastes.
So how do you manage that, Kate? How do you, when you buy something, you obviously, and especially, you're working to be able to make all these acquisitions. So whenever you buy a piece, you're thinking, okay, that means I can't buy something else. So how do you deal with that? Because I could really use the advice.
I don't know that I think if I buy something that means I can't buy anything else. That's probably the smart way to think about it. I think I just tell myself I don't buy that now. And
Mm,
I prioritize one thing over another, maybe because the piece in this show or collection or whatever preview that we're looking at is a better example of some of the other works that maybe I've flagged. And I'll go into that a little bit. Like, I think there are a couple artists who we really love and want to have in the collection. And we know like a few really good examples of their work. Maybe they've been hard to come by, or they just haven't been at the right price point or the right size, any of those things. The minute that that becomes available, to me though, that kind of trumps all the other ones that are still in my early discovery phase, still like tracking and getting to know their career. Some examples of this, I think, every time Anne comes across a Ben Tong, she'll send it
mhm.
over because to me, it was like so magical every time I look at one of his paintings. And I really love his process. I love his vision. And it's just a matter of like, is this like the right piece for your collection? Do you like it? I mean, the same thing happened last December at Night Gallery's booth in Miami. We went to the back rooms, which are always so fun.
Always ask
And
to
she
see what's in the
yeah,
closet.
exactly, exactly, and they happened to have brought, like, one of the bento 2 of the bentongs, I think,
Yeah.
but they weren't, like, hanging, so I think it was just an artist that I've been following, and I think it's an artist that I'll always want to go back to and maybe prioritize because I really, really love it. So I think we always tend to have that conversation of, "Hey, I was thinking about this, but now this became available. How should we think about, prioritizing acquisitions over the course of the year?"
I saw that you also have a Substack from the private collection, and you started writing, so being more open publicly about your collecting approach. And I was wondering what made you decide to do that, and why at this specific point in time? Has that changed the way you approach collecting? What are
Mhm.
the sort of early learnings? Because I think it was only a few months ago that you launched it.
I always share things on Instagram, but there's such a limited amount of time and information you can share. I have a very short attention span when I'm on social media. I think when I'm on that kind of platform, I think maybe something that changed was when I went to Brazil, I want to say maybe last year, we saw a show by a really cool artist, De Polito, and the show was so amazing, and I like there was no way I could fit everything in a reel or in a carousel post, and, like, no one's gonna read a very long caption, and I think Anne had been encouraging, "Try to tell people your point of view more," and I was like, "No, who am I?" But when I wrote about it was just so natural, everything came out, everything that I wanted to share, and I was like, "Hopefully people see the parallels here." Just the really cool, like, Easter eggs even. So I think releasing that first post, I was like, "Oh, I could, like, maybe do these." I don't have, a lot of experience in art history or anything, so I'm mainly just sharing things, that I like, artists I really love, a show I really love, and I think how that has helped change my collection or how it's impacted. I think it's what I said earlier, which is I'm asking so many more questions than I did at the beginning. The curiosity just got deeper and deeper.
That's a really interesting point that you made just now, and I actually had a question around that, which is on the art history piece. To what extent, to both of you, it's a question for both of you. To what extent do you believe that art history knowledge, whether it's formal training, formal academic training or not, how much does it actually help when you start collecting?
I think if you're just starting out collecting, you can have zero amount of art history background because collecting is this lifelong journey and you're going to be learning the whole time. And I compacted my education into 4 years of art history classes, but you have the rest of my life. I'm still reading books and going to historical museum exhibitions. So I will always be learning more art history. And so I think at whatever point in your art collecting journey, you can start to learn more art history, and like we said in the beginning, like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. So you're just always going to be learning.
I don't have a formal art history background. My partner has a design background, so I think part of his, degrees there was some art history in there, so we do talk about it, but I've just independently learned either through museum exhibitions as well, like what Anne said, or books, or just videos. I'm like, I need to just condense this in like 1 hour. Tell me everything about X topic. And I know it's a high level bird's eye view on maybe the whole subject. People do whole PhDs on this, but I think for me, the learning is allowing me to create a deeper appreciation for something that I'm looking at. There's an artist, Jennifer Carvalho, who kind of takes a lot of inspiration from Dutch masters and like medieval Renaissance paintings. And I don't think I would have had as much of a deep appreciation for it if I just kind of knew what those works were like at a high level. I think when you kind of go and zoom in on like certain artists that she takes inspiration from, you're like, oh my God, like all these connections are forming. And it helps you really appreciate why she's doing that. So I really like the independent learning just so I add more context to the things that I'm looking at or acquiring. But beyond art history, there's just so much history in general. I think it is a lifelong journey of learning, not just about art history and artistic practice, but like science, history, politics. Those are all like wrapped up in the artwork that, artists are creating.
For sure, yeah, it's definitely a holistic view of a moment in time, and it's captured in the work and the arts, I think, of the time. But it's funny how art at the same time manages to like capture but also drive the spirit of the time. It's really fascinating. But I was wondering, Kate, when you do this research, do you do it in the context of a specific artist then that you're trying to understand, like you mentioned at the beginning, that practice more in depth and their references? Is that what you were referring to?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes. I think there have been a few instances, I don't want to say few, several, many instances, I think, where Anne shares a preview or, yeah, because she's like, hey, this is like something cool. Let's look into it. And she shares a preview. And in that preview, there's usually an artist statement. There's an essay about the exhibition. If I don't know about the subject and I really am curious about the artwork and the inspiration they're pulling from, I think it's pretty natural to just go and do a little bit of a research dive on some of the themes or historical references that they're talking about. So sometimes it is localized to a specific thing that we're interested in or that we're trying to discuss or talk about. But other times I think it's also just been my like raging ADD. Like one time I'll be like, I need to learn everything about the history of Hilma af Klint right now. And then I go into like a rabbit hole of her mysticism.
On the topic of artists, and when you outside of a specific client mandate, or when you're not looking for one of your clients specifically, what makes an artist stand out to you, and what you look for when you walk into a gallery show or at an art fair? What are the things that you're really trying to pinpoint?
Antonia, I ask myself this question every week when I write my Substack because I am selecting artists I have seen at art fairs or gallery shows or previews, and every week I'm asking myself, what are the qualifiers to put this person, this artist, and this specific piece in the Substack? And what goes behind it is like I look at art all the time, and so I'm seeing, let's start with an artist preview for an exhibition. So you're looking at 10, 20 artworks by the same artist, and now I'm seeing hundreds of those previews, and then I'm going to the shows, and then I've gone to multiple art fairs a year, and so I see those artists at different booths with different galleries at different fairs. The more you see and the more you read, the easier it is to realize, oh, that's the strongest example. Oh, that's the best piece in the show. And for me, that means this doesn't look like anything else. This looks like the hand of the artist, where you can walk in and the formal aspects of the work are immediately identifiable by that artist. And then the next level of that is learning about that artist's practice and what they're exploring and why they're exploring it. And that's where the research and reading comes in. That's where the obsessive part comes in, because I'm like, oh, this is a brilliant lens through which this artist is approaching researching science or researching technology or truth or information. And you're like, wow, now this work not only looks different from everything else, she's actually doing something very different. And the process of it is so compelling. And you're just like, how do I buy more of these? I mean, you want to acquire the artwork and support this artist's practice so she can keep making more. And that's so basically everything you see in my newsletter, I most likely would buy if I had a trust fund.
And did you see like a thread that connects all those picks that you select for your newsletter?
I would say the majority of the artists are really well educated about the art historical canon, and then they have their own practices how they continue that canon of art history, and they're making their own unique mark in it. So you do see references to art history, and that's why you don't actually need to have all of the art history background, because you'll learn those references. But what's really interesting is seeing like the next level and the next step that artist is taking. Who is this artist? What are they up to? What are they trying to say? What have I immediately gleaned from the image? And what more can I learn about this practice and why it's important?
And you, Kate, in your collection, do you see, is there a thread? Is there a theme?
I think maybe at the beginning there was a theme. I have something that I jokingly call the altar wall. There's a wall in my apartment that's just got a lot of, how would you describe those pieces there? They're not all altar pieces technically, but there's like a
They're reverent.
reliquary.
They're
Yeah.
like reliquary, sacred. There's something like there's like a holiness about them, like reverent, I'd call them,
Yeah, I like that word. It's not all like religious art, I would say. It's, I don't have like a gilded like Jesus Christ or something that's like an altar piece. It's a very Filipino thing to do, by the way. But I don't have that in my home, but there's just kind of like a salon hanging of lots of different artworks, and they all kind of have this vibe. So I think there's definitely that theme going on. My boyfriend would say that the theme is haunted throughout the apartment.
Okay.
I don't personally see that. I don't see that, but I am a Scorpio, not to get very woo-woo on you, but so I think the things that draw me in tend to be much bolder. There's like maybe an underworld kind of suggestion, things that are far below the surface, or like your psyche, your like the subconscious. I love things that are like that. And then the other side of me is like, wow, like something so beautiful and like romantic. So I don't know that there's like a super, super cohesive theme, but I do tend to collect a lot of emerging artists, typically artists who are Asian or Filipino, Chinese. I try to find those. And obviously now, because we live together, we try to find like Latin American artists or artists from Brazil just to tell more of our cultural history too.
A nice segue also into a question I had about your nonprofit that you started, the 603 Arts Foundation. Very cool. I was wondering why it was rooted in Asia, Asia Pacific, Latin American art, but you just answered that question. Why you decided to start it now? I mean, you're a young collector, right? And it's quite rare to have somebody that young start already a foundation. I think it's awesome. I think it's really, really cool. And I guess that means you also have thought about legacy. Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Working with Anne over the last few years, she's obviously shared a lot of emerging artists with me, many of them from that from our background, which is really nice. I think the thing that draws me to that is it's telling stories about me, about my family, where I come from. And I am a patron at several museums, and I know that that history is not present as much. It's not as represented. So I do feel like it's important to collect these and preserve them because there is a chance they just get lost in the art history canon over the years if, you know, our other larger institutions don't pay attention to them. The reason I think we started the foundation was because for me, the learning about art was just such an exciting, maybe one of the most exciting things that happened to me in my like 30s. I thought I was like, I'm going to be a woman in STEM. And like that was my whole life. And then I discovered this thing that I love even more. And I didn't even know that that was possible. And I discovered it because of art salons, gallery walks, but also because of exhibitions, going to galleries and learning from the artists, going to their studios. And I think if we're able to bring that to more people, maybe the barrier to enter that would be much lower. And then more people can actually learn about artists that connect with them. It doesn't have to be from their own cultural background, whatever theme or thing resonates with them. And also, we need a new generation of collectors. They probably have a different eye or a different vision. So hoping to kind of foster that too.
I think that's amazing, really, because especially when you're starting out and you don't really think that patronage or supporting an artist's practice actively beyond, just the acquisition itself, you don't think that's within your reach. Why do you think that's important for young people, young collectors who might still feel intimidated? Why do you think it's important for them to realize that supporting an artist's practice matters beyond just the acquisition?
I think I've talked about this with a couple of friends recently, but I think we are living in very tumultuous times. And throughout history, I think there have been many, many tumultuous times. Artists are typically the first people to react to what's going on, and they're creating something. They're writing a song, they like write a book, they make a painting. And that's their reaction about their experience happening right now. And that experience is very unique. It's shaped by who they are, where they came from, and like where they live. So if those stories are not really preserved because they don't resonate with anybody, who gets to tell these stories later on when we have an exhibition about 2026 in some museum? What things then get preserved? Whose stories are then being more represented of this time? So I think having that kind of, I don't know about fair, but like a more comprehensive representation of what's going on, what people are saying, what people are doing, or how they're feeling. That part was really, really important to me. And I think just especially because going to a lot of museums here in New York City, huge cultural capital of the world, I don't see a lot of, ancient Filipino art here. I don't see a lot of contemporary Filipino art in exhibitions. It's not that they're not happening, not that they don't have anything important to say, but maybe it's just not seen as like something that could be included yet. So hoping to kind of bring more of that to the forefront.
I
That's
think
awesome.
what's so inspiring about 603 Arts is that you looked around and you saw it wasn't there, and so you just built it. And I think like seeing this example is like just that alone is so important for this generation of collectors to realize that you can. And I think a lot of people approach the art world like, oh, one day I could do this, or like, yeah, I need to be a millionaire before I do this. And you actually don't. Like you actually could just start
Mhm.
right now and do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be perfect, but we aren't we're humans, and so we're doing the best that we can. And this N603 is very exciting to see such a young collecting couple build this like beautiful contemporary collection and sharing it with people. And I hope it inspires others to start doing the same because we do need more of it.
We made our money in our generation. So we didn't come from collecting families. I think my mom still doesn't understand why I bought a painting. We have different approaches to how we spend money because of where we came from and who we are. But I think it's just more like you can start with the resources you have to do some small things that you think will make an impact.
So right now it's exhibitions of artists that you're supporting or you want to promote your own collection, obviously, as well? And what are the plans for the future then?
Initially, it is exhibition support. Will have an exhibition this summer featuring artists from the collection, but also other artists that we want to support. They're all in that vein of emerging artists, Asian, Latin American. We also supported the MoMA PS1 Greater New York exhibition, which is happening right now, I think through until the middle of August. That was kind of a no-brainer. It just made so much sense. There's a lot of artists living and working in New York City telling their story about what it's like to be here. And there are many artists from that exhibition that were obviously Asian, Latin American as well. And they're all, contemporary living artists. So the mission was just very aligned. In the future, I think it would be really amazing to kind of have a full end-to-end funnel. You can have an international residency that can accept artists from around the world to come and do work here in New York City. And then it culminates in a show where their pieces are in there. And then there's always a catalog. So then they've got a publication that kind of talks about their time and their practice and what they've done. And I think that is like a fantastic opportunity for an artist who might not have the same kind of market. Now you're just expanding their base of collectors.
And how do you fund it?
Personally and through donations. This is why I have to work very hard every day for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I wanted to ask because it's a huge undertaking financially, right? Like if you're gonna have residencies, so it's putting a lot of pressure on you to fund
Mhm.
personally, for sure. So I think it's me even more impressive and inspiring. It's really, really cool. It's really awesome.
We're kind of starting with what we can do, and then if we can get more donations or sponsorships, obviously we can expand the programming.
You mentioned we're living in turbulent times for sure, both politically and socially. It's tricky everywhere. And I was wondering if you noticed a shift in collectors and clients' interests and maybe the way they collect or they approach collecting.
Overall, I think collectors of this generation are really focused on finding artists that personally resonate with them. And so I'm seeing these older structures, maybe, for example, like the buy one, give one to a museum. Things like that used to work in when the market was much stronger. Currently in a very soft market. And so now collectors are really focused on making sure their collection is representative of themselves and their identity and their interest. And I know we live in such an identity culture, but I think that what I've seen are selection acquisitions based on, oh, this very deep personal collection. I believe in this artist practice and I want to make sure he or she can make more of that work. And so the patronage feels like a little more personal and a little less like a checklist. Oh, I need this artist and that artist, and I'll get on the wait list. And it's less about having those artists and more about having the artists that are representative to yourself and your personal collection.
And your clients are mostly in their 30s, maybe early 40s. So it's also something that you mentioned in your newsletter, this generation of collectors emerging from this great wealth transfer.
Mhm.
How do you see them participate in the way the ecosystem operates now? And as a result, which direction do you think the ecosystem will evolve into?
The ecosystem is shifting towards that more personal, deeply resonant artist interest. People are buying, they're more interested in buying what they want versus like, I think an older gallery model might be like, oh, you should support the entire program of the gallery and I'll allow you to buy this artist if you buy this other artist. Or for example, if a gallery has, a wait list for one of their artists, it's like, well, we're going to prioritize the wait list based on who that collector has purchased from the like which other artists from our program that that collector has purchased. And I think this generation, what I've seen from the past 12, 15 years, I mean, they're less interested in participating in that model of an ecosystem and more interested in the significance of the meaning of that artwork. And they're not going to buy just to buy and participate in a roster program. They're going to buy if that artist speaks to them. And I think that's really something the gallery should listen to, and to understand that the methods of discovery, of consuming, there is a lot of technology that goes into this, like the AI that's coming up with this. I mean, I think there should be, instead of an aversion to it, more of like an optimization of it, and how can it help augment this business structure and model to reach these new clients who are already on these platforms and already using it. And I think it can help both sides. So I think that's the shift I'm seeing.
What do you think that means then for the way players operate currently?
From some of the curatorial work I've done at People's and working directly with artist studios and directly with other galleries for consignments, there's a very clear delineation of those players and participants who are more open to these alternative business structures, and their businesses are doing great. Like they hear that there's a soft art market, but they're selling out shows. They can't keep works in the studio, and they're doing really well because they have optimized these tools available to them. And they are opening their markets up to this audience that is curious and wants access. And so when you restrict that access and you insist on an older model that did work in a different time, in a different market and different ecosystem, and you're not listening to how collectors are buying, what they're looking at, what they're interested in, then there's just such a clear difference of the people who are doing well and versus the softer ones.
I would love to hear more, Kate, about your experience of sitting on these institutional committees and boards. I think there's the Bronx Museum, but there's also the Guggenheim Curators Circle. And so how did you end up there? Like, how did that happen? And what was it like? What did you do? Tell me everything.
It actually started with the Guggenheim Young Collectors Circle. I thought it was really cool to be able to meet other young people, some of them collectors, but all of them art enthusiasts. And it culminates in you voting for a piece for the Guggenheim to acquire. The curators give a presentation and then everyone votes. And I thought that was like the first entry into you having a direct impact in the museum's collection. So I decided to do the curator circle just to have more in-depth learning, because I think with the YCC or Young Curators Circle, it was really cool to have kind of the bird's eye view and to get to meet people. But I don't have an art history background, so I really appreciated being able to do very, very in-depth walks with the curators, and the curator circle at Guggenheim definitely offered that. When I was just chatting with Anne, and we've been like working together, she was on the Bronx Acquisitions Committee, so she had brought me on. That's a group of really engaged patrons who want to propose artworks for the museum's collection. That also kind of gets voted on, and then it gets taken to the board for approval. There's also the MoMA Young Patrons Council that Clovis and I are both a part of. Their programming is really great. That group is so active and very engaged. Like, they ask so many questions at every walkthrough. And there's a lot of opportunities, I think, for both curator conversations, but also more kind of like intimate things where you maybe get to go to like someone's private collection and you like explore their collecting history with a lot more depth. But Clovis and I are also part of the Met Apollo Circle, and I do a lot of volunteer work in the Upper East Side, so I'm also at the Frick. It's nice to kind of see these museums' different philosophies. I mean, they all have a very different vision when it comes to creating their collection and when it comes to engaging with their patrons, getting more involved and wanting to know more about the museum. That, I think, started when the Met opened its like newly renovated Rockefeller wing, and there were all of these like ancient artifacts from Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And I was like, there's nothing here from Brazil. What happened? And they're like, oh, like the government, like it's really tough to get them. whatever the case, but it was a glaring, missing part. And it's like such a gigantic part of South America. I didn't really see a huge thing in the Philippines either, but there's a lot of Southeast Asia there. So I think that was kind of, it started clicking where I was like, oh man, like even the historical side, yeah, there isn't a lot. So I kind of just want to be involved so I can see what the museum vision is to start creating that more representative art art collection for their patrons and what kind of programming they feel is important to their patrons.
Really cool. I love how you have such a strong vision, both for your collection, but also more broadly what you want to contribute, to the art world. I think it's super inspiring, really awesome. I'm going to move into the quick fire. You talked about the first piece that you purchased, Kate, but what is the latest one that you acquired?
It was a Maya Cruz Palaleo painting. They're a Filipino artist. Always wanted to add more Filipino artists to the collection, obviously. It's a gouache on paper. I'm really, really excited. This is an artist I've been keeping my eye on.
What about you, Anne?
My most recent acquisition is a sculpture by Sylvie Hayes Wallace. She is represented by Silke Lindner. Kate's laughing because my boyfriend hasn't seen this 5-foot glass sculpture that's about to enter that also lights up. So I've pitched it to him as a lamp and design object.
Nice.
Sylvie's a wonderful, just brilliant sculptor, and she will be presented at Basel in June in their statement section as one of the most compelling voices in emerging contemporary art. So I'm very excited to see that presentation, and I cannot wait to bring my 5-foot sculpture home.
Kate already alluded to this, but how would you describe your collection in one word?
I'll say mystical.
What about you?
I was going to go with process. I have a lot of on paper paintings with layers and layers in palimpsest. Sculptures like my Lotus King of undeveloped film. So that's going to change over time with exposure to the environment. So I really love just seeing this manifestation of inside an artist's mind and those ideas made manifest. And so I have a lot of conceptual art in the home.
Process is such a good word. I think that's so cool.
Who is one artist you haven't bought yet, but you're excited about? Top of your list. I know there's a long list.
Top of my list is Adriana Varjão. She's a super talented Brazilian artist. I really want one of her gigantic plates. It is so beyond my budget, but they're so beautiful and arresting. I think they had a collection of them at the Hispanic Museum here in New York City. And obviously she's got her own little pavilion as well in Nishim in Brazil. But that is an artist, like maybe one day when the lottery gods smile on me, we'll get one of those plates.
Cool. And you,
Anne, can you pick just one, Anne?
I mean, it's a really unfair question, Antonia. I'm gonna
I know.
remember this.
I know it's difficult. It's difficult.
So I have a running wish list that gets updated annually, and right now at the very top is, to no one's surprise, a conceptual sculpture. I'd love a work by Rachel Yoon. She just had a presentation with Night Gallery in LA, and her practice takes these like self-wellness machines like a treadmill or a Stairmaster, and they're motorized into oblivion, like it'll just keep moving into oblivion. And so it's kind of this subversion take on how hard we all work towards perfectionism, but like to what end? Like we're still working hard. I don't know if there's like a light at the end of the tunnel. Her work's very, very exciting to me, and I'm very excited to see my boyfriend's reaction when something like that enters the collection.
Has your boyfriend not seen it yet on the work?
No, it's a constant negotiation. So at the right time, I'll present it, and that time would be as soon as it's acquired and about to be shipped to the house.
You collect, or is it mainly you who decides then, who collects, and your boyfriend just sort of is there but doesn't
Has no
participate in
choice.
the decision making.
Question, you know, if he were on this podcast, he would say that he's in charge of wall space, to which I would counter that this sculpture goes on the floor. So I think that's a safe negotiation.
Very nice. Well played. Cool. Okay, last question. Is there a collector that you look up to?
Kate. I look
Oh
up to
my God,
Kate.
Anne.
That's easy. I mean, you're so inspiring what you're building, and
I
the
agree.
depth session, I mean, it's infectious.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. I was gonna say Kamal Shah Garg is a collector I
yeah.
really look up to. Probably because we both have a tech background, but I think seeing what she's built with making their mark, I really loved that. So she also has a very strong vision and also works to kind of empower and lift up artists that she believes in. So I really love that about her.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful. I loved it. Thank you.
So fun.
Thank you,
so much
Antonio.
for
Thank you
having
so
us.
much for having us. And thanks, Anne, for connecting all of us.
That's it for today's episode of The Collector's Corner. If you enjoyed it, do follow the show and leave a short rating or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It really helps more people find these conversations. And if you've got thoughts, feedback, or someone you think I should talk to next, I'd love to hear from you. Just drop me a message on Instagram or through the website, thecollectorscornerpodcast.com. Thank you for listening and for being part of this growing community. Until next time.